My mother guilt-tripped me into almost giving away my land, until I found out why my brother really needed it. My name is Diane. I'm 53 years old, and for most of my life I believed that being a good daughter meant saying yes. Yes to babysitting my brother's kids when his marriage fell apart. Yes to lending him money he never paid back. Yes to driving 2 hours every Sunday to have dinner with my mother, even after a full week of work, because family shows up. So when my mother called me on a Tuesday evening in March and asked me to come by to talk about something important, I didn't think twice. I packed a bag of oranges from my own tree, the tree that grew on the 5 acres of land my father left me 11 years ago, and I drove to her house. That land wasn't just dirt to me. It was the last thing my father gave me before he died. He'd bought it back in 1987, cleared it himself, planted the orange grove with his own hands. On his deathbed, when the cancer had taken almost everything else from him, he grabbed my wrist and said, "That land is yours, Diane. Not your brother's, yours. Promise me you'll keep it in the family." I promised. My brother Kyle got the house. I got the land. That was the will. Drawn up by a lawyer, signed and notarized. Nobody contested it. Nobody complained. Not back then, anyway. I walked into my mother's kitchen and found Kyle already sitting at the table, which should have told me something right there. Kyle never showed up to family dinners unless he wanted something. "Sit down, honey," my mother said, sliding a cup of tea toward me. Her voice had that particular softness she used when she was about to ask for something big. I'd heard that voice my whole life. "What's going on?" I asked. My mother folded her hands. "Diane, I've been thinking a lot about fairness, about how this family divides things, and I think it's time we talk about the land." My stomach dropped, but I kept my face calm. "What about it?" "Kyle's going through a hard time," she said. "You know that. The divorce took everything from him. He's renting a 1-bedroom apartment with 2 kids some weekends. He needs a fresh start. And that land, Diane, you're not even using it. It just sits there." I looked at Kyle. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at the table like a man waiting for a verdict he already knew was coming. "I use it," I said quietly. "I harvest the oranges every fall. I go out there to think. It's not just sitting there, Mom. It's mine." "Nobody's saying it's not yours," my mother said quickly. Too quickly. "We just think, given everything Kyle's been through, it would mean the world if you sold him the land. At a fair price, of course." "A fair price," I repeated. $20,000, Kyle said, finally looking up. I nearly laughed, except nothing about my mother's face was joking. 5 acres of citrus land in our county, with water rights and an established grove, was worth close to $400,000. Even a lowball estimate would put it well over $300,000. $20,000 wasn't a fair price. It was an insult wearing a fair price's clothes. "Mom," I said carefully, "that land is worth 15, 20 times that." "We're not talking about money, Diane," my mother snapped, her softness gone in an instant. "We're talking about family, about your brother who is struggling and you who has more than enough. Your father would want his children taking care of each other." That was the moment she played her trump card, the one she always kept in her back pocket for exactly these situations. My father. Using his memory like a leash to pull me back into line. "Don't," I said. "Don't bring Dad into this. Dad left me that land on purpose. He told me himself to keep it." "He wanted his children to love each other," my mother said. "Not to hoard things while your own brother suffers." I felt my chest tighten. This was a familiar shape, the guilt closing in from all sides, my mother's disappointment radiating across the table like heat from an oven, Kyle's silent, practiced helplessness. I had felt this shape my entire life, and every single time I had folded. "I need to think about it," I said. which was as close to a no as I could manage in that kitchen. My mother's face changed instantly, the way it always did when she didn't get what she wanted. "Think about it," she repeated flatly. "Your brother is drowning and you need to think about it?" I left that night with my chest aching and my oranges untouched on the counter. I told myself I wouldn't cave. But I'd told myself that before, about smaller things, and I always caved eventually. The guilt had a way of following me home, sitting in the passenger seat, whispering the whole drive back. What I didn't know yet, what I wouldn't find out until 3 weeks later from a stranger who had no idea what she was about to unravel, was that my mother and my brother weren't asking me to sell that land out of desperation. They were asking because they already knew something about it that I didn't. For 2 weeks after that dinner, my mother called almost every day. "Have you thought about it? Kyle's kids ask about you, you know. They don't understand why their aunt won't help their dad. Your father would be so disappointed in you right now, Diane." Each call chipped away a little more of my resolve. I started drafting the paperwork in my head. I told myself $20,000 was still something. I told myself family peace was worth more than money. I told myself a lot of things that, looking back, were just guilt wearing the mask of reason. I even called a real estate attorney, a woman named Patricia I'd used years before for a small dispute with a fence line. I told her I was thinking about selling a piece of land to a family member at a below-market price and wanted to understand the tax implications. "Below market how much?" Patricia asked. "Significantly," I admitted. There was a pause on the line. "Diane, before you do anything, I want you to at least get a proper appraisal. Family sales still have real financial consequences, gift tax thresholds, capital gains bases, all of it. Don't do this on a handshake." I agreed to think about the appraisal, mostly to buy myself time and quiet my own conscience. I hired an appraiser named Rosa, a brisk, no-nonsense woman recommended by Patricia's office, and scheduled a walkthrough of the property for the following week. That's the day everything changed. I met Rosa out at the land on a Thursday morning. The orange trees were heavy with fruit, the air smelling sweet and slightly sharp, the way it always did in early spring. Rosa walked the perimeter with her clipboard, taking notes, snapping photos, occasionally muttering measurements to herself. About 40 minutes in, she stopped near the northeast corner of the property, close to the county road, and frowned at her tablet. "Has anyone approached you about this parcel recently?" she asked. "Realtors? Developers? Anyone?" "No," I said. "Why?" She turned her screen toward me. It was a zoning and land use map from the county planning department, pulled up through some professional database she had access to. She pointed to a large shaded section that included my 5 acres and a stretch of land beyond it. "This whole corridor is part of a proposed rezoning application," she said. "Residential to mixed commercial. There's a logistics company, a distribution hub, looking at this stretch for a new facility. It's still in the public comment phase, but if it goes through, land out here isn't going to be worth $300,000 anymore. It's going to be worth considerably more. Commercial adjacent land near a proposed hub site can jump 5, 6 times in value, sometimes more, depending on the buyer." I stared at the map, my mouth going dry. "How long has this been public information?" Rosa checked her tablet again. "The initial filing was submitted about 2 months ago. It's been posted at county planning meetings since then. Public record, but most people don't go looking unless they're already watching that kind of thing." 2 months ago. Before my mother's dinner. Before the $20,000 offer. Before Kyle sat at that table with his eyes fixed on the tabletop like a man who already knew he was asking for something he had no right to. I thanked Rosa, walked her back to her car, and then sat alone in my truck at the edge of the orange grove for almost 20 minutes, just breathing. My mind was running through everything. Every phone call, every guilt trip, every mention of my father's memory used like a weapon to get me to fold. And underneath all of it was one simple, ugly question. Did Kyle already know about the rezoning? I thought about how he worked. Dispatch coordinator for a regional trucking company, the kind of job where you talk to logistics people, warehouse managers, distribution planners, every single day. The kind of job where you might hear rumors about a new hub site months before the general public ever saw a filing. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to believe my brother, whatever his flaws, wouldn't try to con his own sister out of land, using our mother as the delivery system for the guilt. But I needed to know for sure. And there was only one way to find out. I didn't confront anyone right away. I've learned over the years that confronting my family without proof was like walking into a fight with no weapon. They'd simply out-talk me, twist the story, make me the villain for even asking. I needed facts first. I started by pulling public records on the rezoning application. It listed a company, Kestrel Logistics Partners, as the entity behind the proposed distribution hub. I searched the company, found a bare-bones website and a registered agent address that traced back to a business law firm 2 counties over. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I looked up my brother's co-workers on social media, scrolling through his old posts, tagged photos, comment threads. Buried in a comment from 4 months back, under a post about a work happy hour, one of Kyle's co-workers had written, "Heard the new hub site finally cleared some paperwork hurdle. Guess we'll be busy out that way soon, LOL." Kyle had liked the comment 4 months ago. Before the public filing. Before my mother's dinner. My hands were shaking slightly as I kept digging. I found Kyle's ex-wife Renata on social media. We'd stayed loosely in touch, mostly exchanging birthday messages for the kids. And I sent her a message, careful with my words, asking if she remembered Kyle mentioning anything about land or investments around that time. Her reply came within the hour, and it turned my stomach. Asts? Actually, yeah. He was talking to some guy from work about buying land cheap and flipping it before some zoning thing went through. I thought it was one of his get-rich-quick things, honestly, so I didn't pay much attention. He's had like 5 of those ideas since the divorce. I read that message 4 times. The picture was coming into focus now, and it was uglier than I wanted to admit. Kyle hadn't come to my mother's kitchen because he was desperate and struggling, needing family support to survive. He'd come because he'd heard, likely through a work connection, that Kestrel Logistics was quietly buying up parcels for a hub site. And he knew that if he could get my land at $20,000, he could turn around and sell it to Kestrel for a number that could be 6, 7, maybe even 8 times that once the rezoning cleared and the company came calling with real offers. He wasn't trying to save himself. He was trying to make a fortune off information I didn't have, using our mother's guilt as the tool to get it, and using our dead father's memory as the crowbar to pry it loose. I needed to know if my mother was in on it, or if she was just an unwitting weapon, manipulated the same way I had been. I called Patricia, my attorney, and told her everything. She was quiet for a long moment. "Diane," she said finally, "I want you to do exactly 2 things before you say another word to your family. First, get that appraisal finalized in writing, dated, notarized if possible. Second, do not sign anything, not even a preliminary agreement, not even a handshake deal, until we've had a real conversation about your options." "What are my options?" "Depends what you want," Patricia said. "Do you want to hold the land? Sell it at real value? Confront your family? Or do you want to let this play out and see how far they're willing to go before you show your hand?" I sat with that question for a long time. Then I decided. I wasn't going to confront Kyle directly, not yet. I was going to let him keep talking. I was going to let my mother keep pushing. And I was going to find out exactly how far they were willing to go, and exactly how much they thought my father's memory was worth to them. 2 weeks later, my mother called again, her voice syrupy with false warmth. Diane, honey, come for dinner Sunday, just us. I think we can find a number that works for everyone. I said yes. I drove out to her house with a small recorder in my jacket pocket. Legal in my state for one-party consent, something Patricia had confirmed for me twice, just to be safe. And I sat down at the same kitchen table where this had all started. Kyle was there again, along with a folder he kept glancing at nervously. I've been thinking, my mother began. And I know 20 was maybe a little low. What if we said 35? That's a real number, Diane. That's real money for Kyle to get back on his feet. 35,000, I repeated slowly. For 5 acres with an established citrus grove. It's not about the market rate, my mother said. The same line she'd used before, like a rehearsed script. It's about family taking care of family. I looked at Kyle. Kyle, why do you actually need this land? Not the apartment story, not the kid's story. The real reason. He shifted in his seat. I told you, I need a fresh start. Is this about Kestrel Logistics? The silence that followed was so complete. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the next room. My mother's face went pale. Kyle's jaw tightened, his eyes darting toward the folder on the table like he was debating whether to grab it and run. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, but his voice had lost all its earlier confidence. I talked to Renata, I said quietly. I know about the guy from work. I know about the rezoning filing. I know Kestrel is buying land out there for a distribution hub. And I know you found out about it months before it went public. You weren't trying to save yourself with this land, Kyle. You were trying to flip it. You were going to buy it from me for $20,000 and sell it to a logistics company for maybe $200,000 or more. And you were going to let Mom guilt me into it using Dad's memory as the leverage. That's not... Kyle started. Don't, I said. And something in my voice must have carried real weight because he actually stopped. Don't lie to me again. Not at this table. Not using Dad's name. My mother finally spoke, her voice small in a way I'd almost never heard from her. Diane, I didn't know about any logistics company. I swear to you, I didn't know. I studied her face for a long moment, searching for the lie. And honestly, I believed her. At least about that specific detail. My mother wasn't a schemer in the way Kyle was. She was something else. Something I'd come to understand slowly over the years. A woman so desperate to hold her fractured family together, so terrified of Kyle's instability, that she would use any tool available to smooth things over, including her own daughter's inheritance, including her dead husband's memory, without ever stopping to ask whether the underlying request was honest. You didn't need to know the details, I said quietly. You just needed him to tell you I was being selfish. And you believed it, because believing it was easier than asking him hard questions. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't reach for her hand the way I normally would have. Not this time. Kyle, I said, turning back to him, how much were you going to offer them? He was quiet for a long moment before he finally exhaled, defeated. A rep reached out, informally. Said parcels out there could go for $250, maybe $300, once the zoning clears. I was going to wait for the formal offer, then sell. $250,000 to $300,000. For land he was trying to buy from me, his own sister, for $20,000. I didn't yell. I didn't storm out. I'd spent my whole life being the daughter who kept the peace, who smoothed things over, who said yes so nobody had to feel uncomfortable. And in that kitchen, for the first time, I understood exactly how much that instinct had cost me. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. I'm keeping the land. I'm not selling it to you, Kyle. Not for $20,000, not for $35,000, not for any number. Because you never once approached me honestly. You used Mom as your messenger and Dad's memory as your weapon, and I won't reward that. Diane, please, my mother started. I'm not finished, I said, and she closed her mouth. If Kyle genuinely needs financial help, that's a real conversation we can have, honestly, without games, without pretending this is about family loyalty, when it's actually about a business opportunity he wanted for himself. But that conversation starts with the truth, not before. Kyle's face had gone through several colors, pale, then red, then a kind of gray defeat. I really am struggling, Diane. The Kestrel thing, that was going to be my way out. I wasn't trying to hurt you, I saw a chance and I took it. You saw a chance to take advantage of me, I corrected him. There's a difference. My mother reached for my hand across the table, and this time I let her take it, though I didn't grip back the way I used to. I'm sorry, she said, her voice cracking. I should have asked more questions. I just wanted this family to stop falling apart, and I thought if I could just get you two to agree on something, anything, it would help. Peace built on a lie isn't peace, Mom, I said. It's just a quieter kind of war. I left that night, without the $20,000, without the $35,000, and without the fractured, guilt-soaked version of family harmony my mother had been trying to manufacture for weeks. What I left with instead was clarity. A clean, hard understanding of exactly where I stood with each of them, finally free of the fog that guilt always seemed to wrap around every conversation in that house. 3 weeks later, the rezoning application cleared committee and moved to a final county vote. Kestrel Logistics Partners began sending informal outreach letters to landowners in the corridor. I received one myself, addressed directly to me, offering to discuss acquisition opportunities for my parcel. I didn't respond right away. I wanted to sit with the offer, get real professional advice, and make sure that whatever I decided next, I decided it as the sole owner of land my father trusted only to me, not as a pawn in someone else's plan. It took another 2 months before I made my decision, and I made it carefully, with Patricia's guidance and a second independent appraisal to confirm the numbers Rosa had first uncovered. Kestrel's formal offer came in at $280,000 for the 5 acres, nearly 14 times what Kyle had originally offered me at that first dinner. I didn't sell. I thought about it, turned it over for weeks, sat out at the grove more than once, just watching the light move through the orange trees the way I had as a little girl, following my father around while he worked the land with his bare hands. In the end, I realized the money wasn't really the point anymore. My father hadn't left me that land so I'd get a windfall someday. He'd left it to me because he trusted me, to hold on to something that mattered, even when people I loved tried to talk me out of it. So I kept it. I turned down Kestrel's offer, hired a small local farm manager to help expand the grove, and started looking into whether I could get the property protected under a conservation easement, something that would keep it as agricultural land permanently, no matter what happened with the zoning around it. My relationship with my mother is still healing. Slowly, carefully. She's stopped calling with guilt-soaked requests. She's started, instead, actually asking me how I'm doing, and waiting for the real answer instead of the one that keeps the peace. Kyle and I speak occasionally, mostly about his kids. He apologized once, briefly, awkwardly, in a text message rather than in person, which told me most of what I needed to know about how genuine it was. I don't hate him. I understand, in a distant way, how desperate a person can become after a divorce, how tempting a shortcut can look when you're drowning. But understanding isn't the same as trusting, and I'm not ready to trust him again. Not with anything that matters. What I learned through all of this wasn't really about land, or money, or even about Kyle's skein. It was about the shape guilt takes inside a family, how it gets passed down, generation to generation, dressed up as love, as loyalty, as honoring a parent's memory, when really it's just pressure, applied by people who know exactly which levers still work on you. My father told me to keep that land in the family. I did. Just not the way anyone at that kitchen table expected. The oranges came in heavy again this fall. I picked them myself, the way I do every year, and I sat under the trees for a long time afterward, thinking about how close I'd come to giving away the one thing my father trusted only to me, and how grateful I was that I'd finally learned to ask why before I ever said yes again.